I slipped away quietly, like a ghost in my own life, after discovering my wife's affair 3.5 years into our marriage. It's been over a year since that night, and I've since vanished into the quieter reaches of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I don't know why I'm putting this into words now. Maybe it's just a way of bleeding it out of my system. Maybe someone out there needs to hear it. The dust has mostly settled, and though I'm still healing, I've managed to find something like peace. My name is Ethan. I'm 34 years old now, and I used to believe I had a solid, if not perfect, marriage. In February 2018, that illusion was shattered. Back then, I worked as a systems integration consultant for a mid-sized tech firm. My job involved a lot of travel, but I also had the flexibility to work from home between contracts. My wife, Renee, 31, had a high-paying position in marketing at a Fortune 500 company, and her career had really taken off. As her hours got longer and my trips out of state grew more frequent, the time we spent together shrank. Still, I told myself we were fine, better than fine even. I truly believed we had something solid. I thought we'd just hit a rough patch. We met 5 years earlier at a 4th of July barbecue hosted by a mutual friend in Asheville. I remember the way Renee smiled at me that day. Sharp, confident, magnetic. She had this graceful composure, like someone who belonged to a different world than mine. Me? I was all scruff and sarcasm, a man more comfortable in jeans and flannel than slacks and briefcases. But somehow, we clicked. Within weeks, we were inseparable. The passion between us burned hot and fast. It didn't take long before we were spending most nights together, and within a year and a half, we were married. We found a spacious apartment on the edge of town, the kind of place you rent while dreaming of buying a house someday. For a while, everything felt right. But slowly, things started to unravel. I don't think I noticed it first. Love has a way of making you overlook things that should be obvious. We started arguing more, always about small things, missed dinners, unanswered texts, her being gone late again. Renee said she had to attend networking events and stay late to impress the higher-ups. I tried to be understanding. After all, I wasn't home every night either. She'd snap back that I had no right to question her, given my own work travel. But my trips were usually only a few days at a time, maybe once every 5 or 6 weeks. I told her I could cut back if it helped us reconnect. The conversation always circled back to how I was overreacting or controlling. Nothing ever got resolved. I never suspected she was cheating. Not really. Yes, our sex life had cooled, and yes, she seemed emotionally distant, but I chalked it up to stress. Renee had her work phone and kept her personal phone locked with a passcode, but I told myself that wasn't weird. She worked in a high-pressure environment, often brought her laptop into our spare room-turned office, and claimed she needed space to focus. By fall of 2017, she was going out for work functions 2 or 3 nights a week. She said it was just part of the job. I believed her. Then, one chilly October evening, I offered to help carry groceries in from the car after she returned from a short trip to the store. As I leaned into the back seat to grab a paper bag, something caught my eye, just barely peeking out from under the passenger seat. It was pink, lace-trimmed, unmistakable. One of her bras, the kind she usually only wore when she was trying to impress or seduce. And it was crumpled, hidden in a place it didn't belong. I froze. My throat tightened. My chest ached like something was trying to rip its way out. I stood there for a second too long, holding a sack of onions, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might collapse. I forced myself to keep breathing. I picked up the bag and walked inside like everything was normal. Renee looked at me strangely when I came through the door. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," she said, laughing. I lied and told her I was fine. I didn't even blink. I buried it. I buried everything in that moment just to survive the evening. But something inside me shifted. That night, I lay in bed replaying every odd moment, every missed call, every cold shoulder. I didn't sleep. I told myself I needed proof, needed something more than a lacy pink warning flag tucked under a car seat. And so the next day, I began searching for answers, for courage, for some kind of truth that could explain how the woman I loved had become someone I didn't recognize anymore. I tried to push the thought of the affair out of my head. Maybe, I told myself, I'd been distant too. Maybe if I made more of an effort, gave her more attention, things could go back to how they used to be. So I made a plan. That Friday, I got off work early, drove into town, and picked up some groceries and a bouquet of sunflowers, her favorite. I stopped by a small vineyard on the edge of the valley and bought a bottle of rosé she once said reminded her of summer in Charleston. When I got home, I set the table with the nicest plates we owned, polished silverware, and candlelight. The apartment smelled like roasted garlic and thyme. I was nervous, but hopeful. I thought, maybe this is the night we reconnect. When Renee came home, she barely noticed the effort. She breezed in like she always did, her phone in one hand, heels in the other. "Hey," she said absently, hanging up her coat. I smiled and gestured to the table. "I made dinner." She paused, barely glancing. "Oh, Ethan, I'm so sorry, I didn't know. I have to meet the team at Jasper's tonight, last-minute thing." She walked toward the bathroom. "I need to shower, but I can have a bite with you before I head out." I nodded, but inside I was crumbling. The warmth I'd built up all day evaporated in seconds. My stomach flipped. I felt a heat rise in my chest, anger, betrayal, humiliation, but I said nothing. While she showered, I grabbed my work cell from the counter and, in a moment of weakness or desperation, tossed it into the back seat of her car. I'd been toying with the idea for days. If I left my work phone in her vehicle, I could track it later. I hated myself for even thinking this way, but I needed to know the truth. Then I walked back inside, took one last look at the food, the flowers, the wine, and threw it all in the trash. She came out of the bathroom, hair still damp, dressed like she was about to walk into a magazine shoot. Perfect makeup, effortless beauty. "All right," she said, smiling. "Never mind," I replied quietly. "Go out with your friends." She gave me a weird look. "Are you mad?" "I'm sad," I said. "I'm sad you never want to spend time with me." She rolled her eyes and called me dramatic. "You're acting like a child," she said, grabbing her keys. I stood there, stunned. "Foolish me," I muttered. That was the last thing I said to her before the door shut. When she left, I pulled out my second phone and opened the GPS tracker linked to my work cell. The signal pinged near a bar downtown. Jasper's, the place she always mentioned. I told myself I wasn't doing anything wrong, that I was just protecting myself from insanity. I drove there and parked across the street in the shadows, feeling like some deranged version of myself. I hated what I was doing, but I couldn't stop. About an hour passed before I saw her. She walked out of the bar with a man in a suit, sharp, polished, the kind of guy you'd expect in corporate. They paused near her car, he leaned in, pulled her close, and kissed her. I felt the air leave my lungs. My limbs went cold. My chest tightened as though the world was folding in on itself. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. They got into his car, hers was untouched, and drove off. I followed from a distance, still in shock. 10 minutes later, they pulled into the lot of a mid-range hotel on the edge of town. I parked on the street nearby and watched them walk inside, hand in hand. That was it. I had my answer. I don't remember how long I sat there. I do remember punching the steering wheel until my knuckles hurt. At some point, I drove. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed to move, to escape, to breathe. About 30 miles out, I found a small tavern with a flickering neon sign and parked. I walked in like a ghost, sat at the bar, ordered whiskey. The bartender, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, looked at me and said, "You look like someone ran over your soul." "You could say that," I replied with a weak smile. A man slid onto the stool beside me. Worn boots, weathered hands. He introduced himself as Rye and asked if I was all right. I wasn't. But something about him, his calm, his warmth, put me at ease. We talked. Eventually, I told him about Renee, about what I'd just seen. "You're not alone, buddy," he said, patting my back. "Been there. Hurts like hell. But you know what? This is where your life turns. It's all up to you now." His words hit me harder than I expected. They were simple, but they cracked something open. I nodded. He ordered us both another drink and leaned in. "I've got a trailer on my land. It ain't fancy, but if you need a place to breathe, it's yours. Come see it. No pressure." And just like that, something shifted inside me. Maybe I wasn't totally lost. Maybe, just maybe, I could still find a way out of the pain. "You might be surprised how peaceful it is," Rye said as he sipped his beer. "The trailer ain't much to look at, but it's warm, dry, and the roof holds. You could stay a while, just to clear your head. I'd cut you a good deal, too. Honestly, if you just watch the place while I'm traveling, I'd be grateful." He scratched his beard and gave me a half smile. "Might do you some good getting away for a while." The bartender, who'd been listening from a few feet away, chimed in with a smirk. If someone had offered me a trailer to escape my lunatic ex, I would have been gone before they finished the sentence. Sometimes a cheap roof and some distance is all you need to breathe again. I chuckled dryly, though it felt hollow. The whole conversation felt surreal, like I'd slipped into someone else's story. But part of me, maybe the broken part, thought, why not? What did I have to lose? "I'll think about it," I told Rye. "Might be just what I need." We agreed to meet at his place in a few days so I could take a look at the land and the trailer. As I drove home that night, a strange calm settled over me. It wasn't peace exactly. It was more like resignation. Like I'd finally stopped running from the truth and accepted that the marriage I'd fought so hard for was already dead. All I had left to do was bury it. When I walked into the apartment, Renee was standing in the kitchen, barefoot, scrolling through her phone. She looked up briefly and said, "Where have you been?" I stared at her, taking in the woman I once adored. "Out for drinks," I replied flatly. She narrowed her eyes. "Are you drunk?" "No," I said, then added, "Are you having an affair?" Her face barely shifted. A brief flicker of something crossed it. Surprise? Fear? But she recovered too quickly. "What? No, that's ridiculous." "I heard you were getting close with someone at work," I said carefully, leaving the source vague on purpose. She scoffed, folding her arms. "From who? That's absurd, Ethan. You're being paranoid." I didn't answer, just watched her for a moment longer. "I'm going to the bar with some friends," I said, brushing past her. She called after me, "What's going on with you lately?" But I didn't stop. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I lay on the living room couch staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying that image of her and the man at the hotel. The way he touched her, the way she smiled. My gut churned with a sick mix of sorrow and rage. But strangely, when I thought about the trailer Rye had offered, it brought a sliver of hope. Maybe I could start over. Maybe this didn't have to be the end of everything. By morning, we acted like nothing had happened. The silence between us was heavy, but we both wore masks. I had already begun pulling away in my mind. Later that week, I drove out to Rye's place. He lived on a modest ranch nestled in a stretch of woods near the base of the Blue Ridge. The trailer he mentioned was better than I expected, about 26 feet long, clean, fully furnished, and somehow familiar, like a place I might have crashed with friends during a college road trip. Rai accepted my offer for the trailer. He even took me to the piece of land he planned to park it on, secluded, surrounded by tall trees and the whisper of mountain wind. There were hiking trails nearby, a shallow creek, and plenty of silence. He lived in a small cabin just up the hill, the kind of place that made you forget about phones and deadlines. Back at home, I kept pressing Renee. Gently at first, then with more edge. I wanted her to admit it, to just say it. But instead of honesty, I got gaslighting. She turned the blame on me, made me question my sanity, my memory. Each denial twisted the knife deeper. One night I told her flat out, "If I find out you've been cheating, there's no coming back from it." She just stared at me, stone-faced. "You're imagining things," she said coldly. I almost laughed at how absurd it had become. I hated that I had no photos, no texts, nothing concrete. Just the memory of that kiss and a dozen small betrayals. So I stopped talking, and I started planning. While Renee was at work, I began moving my things into the trailer, quietly, methodically. No big confrontations. Just drawers emptied, boxes packed, bags carried out to my truck one at a time. I didn't take anything that was technically ours, just what belonged to me. It felt like the only thing I could control. Oddly, Renee started treating me a little better during this time. Maybe she sensed something shifting. But whatever her reasons, it was too late. The damage was done, and I had already made up my mind. One evening, as she was heading out for another work event, I grabbed my keys too. "Where are you going?" she asked, pausing at the door. "Just meeting some friends," I replied. "You wouldn't know them, work people." She looked taken aback, maybe even a little hurt. "Okay, have fun." "I will," I said, and I meant it, because for the first time in months, I had a way out, and I intended to take it. "Where are you headed?" Renee asked as I slipped my boots on by the door. "Meeting up with some friends," I replied casually. "Just shop talk. You wouldn't be interested. You don't know them anyway." She looked like she was about to ask more, but I cut her off before she could. Funny how those same lines used to come from her lips every time I'd ask to join her for one of her many company events. Now they came from mine, and the echo of it stung. "All right," she said with a sharp edge in her voice. "Have a good time." "I definitely will," I answered, knowing full well it wasn't the kind of night out she thought it was. I spent more time working on the trailer that week, fixing up small things here and there. Rai let me borrow some tools, and every now and then we'd grab a drink at the local bar. I met some of his family too, genuine people with weathered smiles and kind words. Being around them felt like standing in a place untouched by betrayal. It helped, even if just a little. I even started cutting back on drinking. I didn't want to bury myself in a bottle, tempting as it was. I'd seen too many men drown that way, and I wasn't going to be one of them. A few days later, Renee told me she'd be leaving town for a work trip. "Executive team and a few department heads," she said while zipping up her suitcase. I nodded and asked, "Anyone I know going?" She gave me a look, but I couldn't help myself. "Well," I added, "I hope you and your boyfriend have a great time." The words were out before I could stop them. Her eyes flared with anger, and just like that, we were screaming at each other. I regretted it, not because I was wrong, but because I'd given her an opening to play the victim again. Rai had warned me about that. "It doesn't matter who he is," he'd said. "The point is, she chose to leave you, Ethan. She broke the vow. Doesn't matter if the guy's a CEO or the janitor. She's the one who burned the house down." And he was right. It didn't matter anymore. Her trip was the perfect chance to disappear. While she was gone, I packed up what little I had left. My clothes, my laptop, a few books. I didn't touch the furniture or anything we'd bought together. I didn't want it. I didn't need reminders. I left a short note on the kitchen table. Just 3 words scrawled in ink across the top. I hope it was worth it. Beside it, I set my wedding band. Cold, weightless, meaningless. And then I left. As I pulled onto the highway with the mountains in my rear view, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't closure, not exactly. Just the beginning of silence. A space where healing might grow if I let it. I breathed in the mountain air and kept driving toward the foothills, toward Rye's land, where the trailer waited. In the days that followed, I got back into running. The trails helped. The sweat helped. The pain in my lungs felt more honest than the pain in my chest. Renee started texting while she was still away. "We just landed," one message read. Another, "Team dinner tonight. Talk soon?" Then came the more frantic ones. "Where are you? Why aren't you answering me?" I didn't respond. By the time she returned home and realized I was gone, my phone was lighting up with missed calls and voicemails. I ignored them all. Her mother called too, but I didn't pick up. We'd never been close, and I knew why she was reaching out. Guilt, panic, damage control. I didn't need it. The texts kept coming. "What's going on? We need to talk." "I don't know what you think you saw, but you're wrong. There's no affair." Then, a week later, "I'm sorry. Things got out of hand. I made a mistake. I was overwhelmed and lonely. You were gone a lot. I didn't plan for anything to happen. I was going to end it." That was the confession I'd been waiting for, and it only made me feel worse. She'd called it a mistake, like it was a math error on a spreadsheet. But cheating isn't a slip of the pen. It's a choice, 1,000 choices. Every day she looked me in the eye and lied. No part of me wanted to go back. Her texts became more desperate, pleading for us to talk it through, fix what's broken. I didn't answer, not once. When the guilt campaign failed, the venom started. "You're a coward," she wrote. "You ran away without saying a word. You don't even care about us. Please come home so we can talk. I deserve a chance to explain. You're not even giving me that." I let the words flow in one ear and out the other. I was done explaining, done forgiving things that shouldn't happen in the first place. She had destroyed our marriage one lie at a time. Now I was finally learning to live without them. After I changed my number, things went quiet for a while. Then, in June 2018, I got an email from Renee. It was short, clinical even. She told me she had hired a lawyer and was planning to file for divorce. I replied with nothing more than, "Okay, that sounds good." I think she expected more of a reaction. Instead, it triggered a flood of emails, requests to meet, offers to talk things out. She promised that if I agreed to an uncontested divorce, she'd leave me alone. I agreed, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to be done, truly done. And with that, I was free. A few months after leaving the apartment we once shared, I never had to see her again. She seemed more bothered by that than I was. There wasn't any real closure, just absence. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about her in the weeks that followed. I did. Sometimes I'd hear a song we used to dance to while cooking dinner, and something in my chest would ache. Other times, her laugh would echo in my mind when I passed someone who looked vaguely like her. But those moments became fewer, softer. Eventually, they faded. Now that the divorce was final, my life began to shift in a way that felt manageable. I wasn't healed, not completely, but I wasn't breaking apart anymore either. A couple months after everything was official, I met someone. I was running a trail just beyond Rye's land when I spotted her standing beside a car with a flat tire. Her name was Claire. She lived just down the hill. I helped her change the tire, and by the time we were done, she was laughing at one of my awkward jokes. We started seeing each other here and there. Nothing serious, not yet. She was a few years younger, but grounded, smart, and beautifully kind. She called me her mountain man, said she liked how simple I kept things. I wasn't ready to fall in love again, and Claire didn't ask me to. But her presence reminded me that not all relationships start with lies and end in pain. Some people just want peace. That's all I wanted too. I still lived in the trailer, and I had no plans to move. Something about that life, the quiet, the trees, the breath of cold air in the morning, made the weight of the past easier to carry. I simplified everything, my routines, my thoughts, my attachments, and in doing so, the grief finally loosened its grip. I know not everyone gets the chance to walk away from heartbreak with a clean slate. I was lucky, in a twisted way, married only a few years, no kids involved. The damage was personal, but it didn't ripple into generations. If you're reading this and you're stuck in something that hurts, please believe me. You don't have to stay. You don't have to waste years with someone who betrays you. You are allowed to leave. Still, even with all the distance I'd created, the past had a way of catching up. Not long ago, I stopped by a local coffee shop in the neighboring town. It's a quiet place with patchy Wi-Fi and great cinnamon muffins. I sometimes take my laptop there to catch up on work. That Saturday, I was just finishing up and heading toward my truck when I heard someone call out, "Ethan!" I turned, and my stomach twisted. It was Renee. She was across the street, waving like we were old friends, like we hadn't torn each other apart. I froze. My instinct screamed to run, but I stood there as she jogged across and approached me. I don't know what I expected. Maybe that she'd cry, beg, scream. Instead, she just held out her hand and said, "I've been looking for you." I held my arms up and stepped back, palms open. "Don't." She stopped in her tracks. Her expression shifted. Pain, embarrassment, something else I couldn't place. "Please, Ethan," she said softly, "can we talk? Just for a minute." I didn't want to, but I gave a nod and pointed to a bench outside a small shop. She followed me, silent at first. Then she started commenting on how I'd changed. My beard, my arms, the way I carried myself. She was dressed like she used to for weekend getaways, ponytail, white shorts, tank top, like she'd studied a memory and tried to recreate it. But I wasn't the same man, and whatever charm she was trying to reignite, I wasn't buying it. Then she said it. "I'm sorry for the affair." She told me that after I left, her world fell apart. Her company found out about what she'd done. It got tense. People whispered. Eventually, she resigned. The man she cheated with? He was engaged at the time, and when his fiancée found out, she left him. He blamed Renee for everything. She tried to explain. She said she never meant to hurt anyone, that guilt ate at her. She began to cry. But I just sat there, watching people pass by. Her words washed over me like static. When she finally looked up, red-eyed, I asked quietly, "What do you want from me?" And that's when I realized. Whatever she was hoping for, I didn't have it to give. Not anymore. Renee spoke softly, her voice breaking as she tried to explain. It wasn't just about him, she said. It was the culture at work, the pressure to fit in, to prove something. I was caught up in the politics, the competition. He knew how to pull strings, say the right things. I didn't even see it happening at first. She glanced down at her hands, twisting her fingers. But I wasn't innocent. I let it happen. I leaned into the attention. I wanted to feel powerful too, and in some twisted way, I convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it was. I thought I was using him as much as he was using me. She looked up at me then, her eyes glassy. "I was going to tell you, I swear I was. But every day that passed made it harder.
I started drinking more after work, not to party, but to shut it all out. The guilt was crushing. I hated myself. I hated what I'd become. Her voice cracked. The night you left, something inside me broke. I ended things with him right away. I told him it was over and walked away from the job not long after. I thought if I could find you, maybe we could start over. Maybe there was still a version of us that could be saved. She paused, her lips trembling. Even if we're divorced, I needed to know if it was really too late. I stared at her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to be cruel, to meet her pain with bitterness. But what I felt was deeper than anger. It was grief. You don't get to walk back into my life like this, I said, my voice steady but low. You can't undo what you've done with apologies and memories. You didn't just cheat, you shattered everything we built.
She tried to speak, but I continued. We were a team, or so I thought, and you throw it away. Do you think I'll forget the night I sat in my truck and watched you walk into a hotel with another man? Do you know what that did to me? People nearby had started to turn their heads, sensing tension in our voices. I noticed, but I didn't care. She reached for my arm and started to cry, burying her face into my shoulder. I deserve this, she said through sobs. I know I do. I ruined it all. I gently pushed her away and looked her in the eyes. Yes, you did. She wiped her face and whispered, Can I take you to dinner? Just to talk more. I'm not asking for everything, just a chance to be honest. I'd rather not, I said. Please, Ethan, she pressed, her voice small. I want to be transparent. I want to spend more time with you. I need to say everything I couldn't before. I still love you so much it hurts. I know you probably don't believe me, but before you left, I didn't realize how much you meant to me. Losing you broke something in me I don't think I'll ever fix. Her tears began again, this time more violently. She couldn't catch her breath. I reached out, steadying her shoulders. It was instinct more than affection. Something inside me still cared, even if it wasn't the same kind of love anymore. We walked to a quieter corner of the town square and sat on a bench beneath a rustling maple tree. After a long silence, I finally asked, How did you find me? She looked at me with a hesitant smile. I didn't hire anyone, if that's what you're thinking. I ran into Stacy a few weeks ago. We were catching up and I asked about you. She didn't want to tell me anything. She said you made her promise. But I pushed. Eventually, she slipped up and said you were living somewhere out here. So I started driving through town every so often. I hoped I might see you. I exhaled, almost laughed. Figures. Stacy can't keep her mouth shut. Renee smiled faintly, then looked away. Later that evening, we agreed to have a simple dinner at a small cafe with a patio. I made sure neither of us drank. I wasn't going to let alcohol cloud anything she said. The conversation was surprisingly calm, almost gentle. She tried to convince me she hadn't been with anyone since I left. She swore I was the only one she ever truly loved. She asked me to stay longer after dinner. I declined. She begged me to consider trying again. I stayed silent. When she asked for my number, I shook my head. You'll just fill it with texts and voicemails, I said. She cried again, but respected my answer. Before leaving, she promised to email me with her plans to return next weekend. Then, just as she reached her car, I stopped her. If it had been me, I asked quietly, if I had been the one who cheated, would you have forgiven me? She paused. In time, yes, but only with therapy, counseling, a binding agreement maybe. It would have taken years. I nodded. All right, maybe I could do that in 5 or 10 years. She turned back and took my hands. God damn it, Ethan. I will always love you. I'd do anything to prove it. Her words hit hard. Even after she drove away, they stayed with me. But no matter how sincere she sounded, I still couldn't see a version of us that made sense anymore. Not now. Not ever. Even though our last conversation ended without chaos,
I couldn't imagine ever seeing Renee as a friend. Maybe someday, but not now. The scar was still fresh. The air back home felt colder than usual, but I went for a long run anyway. My feet hit the forest trails with rhythmic certainty. I was alone again, and strangely, I was okay with that. Afterward, I cracked open a beer and sat outside the trailer, watching the fog roll down from the hills like a slow sigh. How could I be sure she wouldn't ruin this piece I'd carved out of my pain? Time had given me clarity. The distance had given me space to heal. But the memories? They still clung like damp clothes after a storm. This will probably be my final update. When I first posted my story online, it kept getting removed. Maybe it was too raw, too honest.
To sum it all up, I disappeared from my ex-wife's life for over a year after discovering her affair. When she eventually found me, she wanted a second chance. She cried, she apologized, and she begged. But I couldn't do it. Last week, she emailed me again. It was long. She said she still loved me. She wanted to visit me for a weekend to see if we could start fresh. I never replied. At 34, I'm not in a hurry to change my life. I like the solitude, the simplicity. I made it clear in my email, I'm not open to reconciliation. I didn't give her my number. I told her that trust, once shattered, is not so easily rebuilt. She wrote back saying she'd had taken a job out of state. Apparently, her plan had been to convince me to move with her, banking on the fact that I work remotely. But her time ran out. I had already made other plans. I'll be gone on business next week. I don't think she understands yet, but her time with me is over. I wish her the best, I really do. But she's not mine to carry anymore. If she writes again, I'll ignore it. If she finds someone new, I hope she doesn't betray them too. Ethan's story is a painfully familiar one. When betrayal comes from someone you trusted most, the impact runs deep. In today's world, it's easy to feel pressured to forgive, to move on quickly, or to reopen doors that should remain closed. But healing is not a performance, it's personal. It's okay to choose peace over reconciliation. It's okay to walk away when someone has shown you who they are. If you're in a toxic relationship or dealing with the aftermath of betrayal, give yourself permission to prioritize your well-being. Look for the warning signs: gaslighting, blame shifting, emotional distance. If someone makes you feel like you're hard to love unless you accept being hurt, that's not love. Set boundaries, protect your space, and know that your worth doesn't depend on being chosen by someone who failed to honor you. Choosing yourself is never the wrong decision. Stay strong. You're not alone.